Tell Grayson we missed it. Genesis 40. All right, so somebody give me the heads up. Where are we in this story? Somebody said it's over here. What? Joseph's been thrown into prison. Why? That's right. He was accused of coming on to Potiphar's wife. He wouldn't do it, but that's why she was mad. As a result, he gets thrown into prison. When we get to chapter 40, we get the story that most of you are probably familiar with about Joseph in prison, and that's that while he's there, he gets the opportunity to interpret the dream of a couple of people. How many of you know this story? Have you heard this before? Okay, so everybody's pretty familiar with this. The baker and the cupbearer for Pharaoh, and if you don't understand what that means, Pharaoh had a person that would first taste the wine before he drank it, in case it's poisonous and whatnot, and then he brings the wine, and he's like a waiter, delivers it to Pharaoh. Then you have the baker who bakes the bread and does all that and brings it to Pharaoh. And they offended Pharaoh, and they were thrown into prison, and while they're there, they have a dream. Each one of them has a dream, and Daniel interprets the dream. And we're going to see what happens there. So this chapter really portrays Daniel as quite the visionary. Do what? If I want to call him Daniel, I can. Joseph. You come sit right here. Okay. Joseph. All right. Joseph is quite the visionary. I blame you in part for this. I don't know why, but I feel like somehow. So Joseph, the dream interpreter, right? He's going to do this again for Pharaoh, but this is where he begins to develop this reputation as this man who is really able to see things that other people can't see. What we're going to talk about in Genesis 40 is what Daniel can't see. Not what he does see, but what he can't see. And I want to work through the chapter first from Daniel's perspective, and then we're going to come back and look at it again, maybe with different eyes. So somebody read for me first. Let's read the first 4 verses, and let's just talk a little bit about the man Joseph is serving. Somebody read Genesis 40, 1 through 4. All right, so let's pay attention now. You've got Joseph, who back up at the end of chapter 39 was thrown into prison, right? It says in verse 20 of chapter 39, Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. Well, now we get into chapter 40, and we find out that the cupbearer and the baker have offended Pharaoh, and it says that he was furious with them. So where did he put them in verse 3? In the house of the captain of the bodyguard in the jail. So now we find out where this jail where Joseph has been put is. Where is this jail? In the house of the captain of the bodyguard. You wonder who that is? If you turn back to chapter 39, verse 1, somebody read that. Who is the captain of the bodyguard? Interesting. So Joseph is actually in the prison in Potiphar's house, the captain of the bodyguard. And one of the reasons that's remarkable to us is because we find out that Daniel, even though imprisoned wrongly, has turned out to be the best little prisoner you would ever want, right? We saw that up in chapter 39 as well. That he did so good in the prison that the chief jailer in verse 22 committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners in the jail. Whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. The chief jailer didn't supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. There's not even any bitterness going on in Joseph's life. You have a tough time finding a flaw with this guy, don't you? I mean, every time you want to look for a reason to justify why he's in prison, you just can't find one, because at every turn you just find out he is the best guy. I mean, he's just such a good guy. He won't sin. He's not bitter. He's making the most out of every opportunity. He's just really a remarkable fella. And now he is in prison, serving Potiphar still as a prisoner, not as a slave. And he's been locked up now with 2 people that have gotten themselves in a lot of trouble with Pharaoh, the cupbearer and the baker. Well, Now in the midst of this is what we've been waiting for. Like I said, we want to read this as a Hallmark movie, and we see that Joseph is clearly the good guy. Judah is clearly the bad guy. Potiphar's a bad guy. His wife's a really bad lady. And you've got all these bad people, and so we just keep waiting for that moment where fate intervenes and delivers Joseph, where, he finally gets what's coming to him, where he finally gets his big break, and here it begins. Somebody read verses 5 through 8. All right, if you didn't like Joseph before, you're really going to like this guy now. So here he is a prisoner, and he sees two other prisoners, and Joseph is around like the welcoming committee in the prison, and he's going around and he's checking on the other prisoners. And I don't know if you've ever seen any movies that have to do with prisons, but you don't routinely see one prisoner go around and check on all the other prisoners. And notice what happens as he walks by and sees the cupbearer and the baker. It says in verse 6, what were they? It says they were sad. And Joseph, what do you do if you're in prison and you see a guy in cell 11B looks a little sad? What do? You just keep walking, right? I mean, he's in prison, for crying out loud. He's supposed to be sad. But Joseph cares. Why are you so sad? Joseph asks. And they tell him, we had a dream. And nobody can tell us what it means. Now, there's going to come a moment when Joseph is going to try to use the interpretation of his dream to his advantage. That's going to happen. But that's not what's happening here. What is Joseph doing? What does he say when he finds out they have a dream that can't be interpreted? Yeah, what is that? What is he doing? Do what? He's bringing glory to God. In the middle of a prison, after being wrongly accused, wrongly sold, you'd think if anybody had a beef with God at this point, it would have to be Joseph, right? But he doesn't. Not only that, we're in Egypt, the place where they do not know the God of Israel. And Joseph's answer is a witnessing opportunity. I can tell you the one who has all wisdom. I can tell you about the God who knows all things. I can tell you about the God who created you. I can tell you about the God who gave you that dream. I can tell you about the God who has planned out your life. God not only gives dreams, but he interprets them. Tell it to me. I think this is remarkable. This Joseph, good son, good brother, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison, making the best out of it. And now, this Joseph in prison has turned into a witness for God. That's pretty remarkable to me. In 1 Peter 3, it says, take every opportunity always to give a defense to those who want an account for the hope that's within you. I mean, do whatever you can to tell about others the greatness of God. And Joseph is. But then we keep moving. Somebody read 9 through 15. All right. So we have a dream of a cupbearer, and he gives him the reality. He says, well, there was a vine, and there were blossoms, and there were grapes, and the cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I want to know what this is. And Joseph says, it's very clear. The 3 branches are 3 days, and within 3 days, guess what? You're getting out of here, right? In 3 days, you're getting out of here. You're going to go back to working for Pharaoh. He's going to give you your job back. You're going to continue to do what you did. Congratulations. But Joseph has a message for him. What is it? remember me. I'm not supposed to be here, right? I shouldn't be here. I was sold into slavery. It was all a mistake. When you get back, remember the kindness I've shown to you and show kindness to me. Now, if this is a movie and you're following along, right? Joseph just got his big break, didn't he? As fate would have it, he talks to a guy who's fixing to go be in the very presence of Pharaoh, and we think now, aha, we finally see how it's going to work. Everything's going to go good. Now, before we get to the end, we get another dream, and that's the baker. Somebody read 16 to 19. I have to think that when the baker heard the interpretation of the cupbearer's dream, he got a little excited. He said, so tell me mine, right? And his turned out a little different, right? What's his? Yeah, they're going to take your head off. Yeah. Close, right? He's going to lift up his head, going to lift yours from your body. He's going to hang you on a tree. The birds are basically going to eat your flesh. Now, why include that in the story? Okay, yeah, that's a good point. He's not just lying. He's not just trying to tell you what you want to hear. You're Joseph, and you just interpreted a dream for a man that he's about to be restored to office, and this man's about to go before Pharaoh, and you get your opportunity to say, remember me. And the very next dream you interpret is about a man who offended Pharaoh, and at a whim, he gets beheaded. And it's a reminder to Joseph what could happen to him at any moment. At any moment, if Potiphar gets sick of Pharaoh, at any moment, or gets sick of Joseph, at any moment, if Pharaoh decides, who is this Joseph? At any moment, if they decide they want to behead him, what do? They behead him. Who is he? He's a slave. We bought him out of the land of the Canaanites. He's not one of us. This is a reminder to Joseph, not only do I think I have found my way out of here, but I need to get out of here, right? I need to go. This is not a safe place to be. I realize everything looks well and good and, he's in charge, but he is a slave, he is a prisoner, and at any moment, he could be beheaded just like this baker. And so he's told the cupbearer, you need to go and tell Pharaoh I shouldn't be here. And then we get to verses 22 through 23. 20 through 23. Somebody read that. You're following the story, and he shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be in Egypt. He shouldn't be in jail. He shouldn't be here. But he gets this opportunity to get deliverance because the cupbearer's there, and he has a dream, and he interprets it. Remember me. And it looks like everything is finally lining up for Joseph. And then you get the biggest punch in the gut in the story. That hope he was holding on to, the rug just whoosh right out from under him. What does it say? The cupbearer did not remember him. Just by way of getting a framework, somebody read verse 1 of chapter 41. How long? 2 years. I mean, imagine if I told you you're going to be blind temporarily for 2 years. That make a dent in your day? I mean, that's not, temporary is one thing, but 2 years? Joseph now, this ray of hope, this sliver of a chance that he had is gone. And now for 2 years, he's forgotten, and for 2 years, he's just going to be in this prison. And if you look at everything from Joseph's point of view, what Joseph can see with his own eyes, what does it look like? I mean, be honest, what does it look like? What? I'm not getting out of here. Do what? Hopeless. God has abandoned me. Nobody sees me. I'm forgotten. Why would you interpret it any other way? I mean, at 14 years old, I get sold by my brothers into slavery. I try to be the best slave, and I get falsely accused by a wicked woman and thrown into jail. I try to be a good prisoner and help out other prisoners, and they forget me. I mean, if Joseph is going only by what he sees, there's no hope here at all, right? Many times in your life, you're going to walk through circumstances, and if all you go by is what you can see with your eyes, it's going to be absolute disaster, because you're not allowed to see what God sees. You're not allowed to know what God knows. He just lets you see all that you need to see. He lets you see all that's important. He's not asking Joseph to do anything. Joseph's just being faithful to use the gifts that God has given him. But Joseph's not allowed to see anything. And I can only imagine how dejected and depressed, how much he must have felt like God had abandoned him. And I'm going to tell you, there are going to come times in your life when you're going to face things and you're going to wonder that. You're going to wonder, why would God allow me to walk through such a hardship? Why would he allow me to walk through such a tragedy? God must have certainly forgotten about me. He must have certainly taken his eyes off me. He must have certainly abandoned me. He must not see. He must hate me. I mean, could you see Joseph saying any of those things? Yeah. I mean, being sold alone, let alone a slave, let alone a prisoner, 2 years, forgotten. I mean, Joseph must feel like the most cursed man alive. It doesn't matter what he does. Somebody once said, cheer up, it could be worse, and Joseph cheered up, and what? It got worse, right? Every time. It's terrible. But we read the story not through Joseph's eyes, we read the story through God's eyes. What Joseph couldn't see. And the first thing we recognize about Joseph is that God had him in the perfect location. Why do we say Joseph was in the perfect location? All right. How? Okay. So, in a simple sense, to show the glory of God to other people, God has Joseph already in the prison where this chief baker and cupbearer are going to go. Do you think it's a mistake? Do you think it's just a chance that they happen to pass by? No, there's nothing chance about that. There's nothing random about that. Who do you think orchestrated that appointment? God did. He put them there at the same time. We talk about the perfect opportunity from God's eyes. What was the opportunity that Joseph had? What was the opportunity he had while he was there? I mean, you know it. We just read it. No, not to get out. To interpret dreams. Now, Joseph himself said, who can interpret dreams? God. So why could Joseph interpret dreams? Because God gave him the ability. We call those gifts, right? A spiritual gift. That God gave Joseph the ability to interpret dreams and then put Joseph in a place where he would run into a guy who just so happened to need a dream interpreted. You think that's a coincidence? It just happened. Blind luck. No. Then we think about perfect timing. This is the one that's harder for us to swallow. Perfect timing. It says the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph but forgot him. And we think that is a bummer. That is wrong. That shouldn't happen. Why was it right for the cupbearer to forget? I'm not saying the cupbearer did right. As a moral man, he should have remembered, but he didn't. But from God's perspective and God's timing, why was it right for Joseph to be forgotten for 2 full years? That's right. Pharaoh hadn't had his dream yet. There is no famine yet. That hasn't occurred yet. It's not time yet. Was God being cruel to Joseph? No. God has Joseph right where he needs to be, to the stage to be set to be able to talk to Pharaoh. Now, when you walk through things in your life, you find yourself in situations you may not like. You find yourself in locations you may not like. You find yourself in the duration of something you may not like. And it may very well feel like I have been abandoned. I have been forgotten. This is not right. It's all wrong. Why am I here? Could you imagine how Joseph must have felt on the day when the cupbearer went back to work and he got stuck in the prison? I just sat here every day in the prison knowing that sorry cupbearer, right? I interpreted his dream, and he forgot all about me. You can imagine how awful that would feel. It just goes on and on and on. But Joseph can't see what God's doing. Now, to that end, I want you to turn to the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 4. My wife told me I've gotten long-winded on Wednesday nights, and I'm trying to get better. Turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. She told it to me in a real nice way, but she still told it to me. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And I want you to see verses 16 through 18. I think if Joseph had a New Testament, 2 Corinthians 4, 16 through 18 would be double underlined, highlighted, recopied, and written all over the walls. 2 Corinthians 4, 16 through 18. We there? All right, listen to what Paul says. Therefore, we do not lose heart. And just think about that for a second. Do you think Joseph had any reason to have lost heart? Absolutely. Just give up. And Paul said, we don't. Even though our outer man is decaying. You think Joseph ever had that thought? I'm rotting away in this prison. My life is being wasted in this prison. I mean, I have the gift to interpret dreams. I don't even get to use it. I'm just stuck here in this prison. I came in as a young man. Maybe I'll come out as an old man. Maybe I'll die in here. My life is wasting away. Paul said, we don't lose heart. Even though our outer man is decaying, what's happening on the inside? Our inner man is what? Paul said, even though we find ourselves in circumstances where the outer man feels like it's hopeless and over, I have something on the inside that lifts me up and builds me up and makes me strong every single day. And you're thinking, I want to know what medicine this is, right? You're telling me you're in a situation where the outer man is so hopeless and so despondent that you're comparing it to a corpse that's rotting away. And you're telling me that even though you're in that condition where the outer man is fading away, you're telling me that on the inside, you're brand new every day. I mean, you just wake up with a new energy every day. And the question would be, how in the world do you do that? How can you find yourself in a situation where the outer man is decaying and tell me that your inner man is being renewed every single day? How? Verse 17. This is what Paul knows. For momentary, light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory, far beyond all comparison. Now there's some comparison words here. On one hand, our affliction, Paul says what about our affliction? He describes it. Light. How does he define our glory that's coming? Nope. Our affliction is light. Our glory, weight. What else do you see about affliction? Momentary. What do you find out about glory? Eternal. You see the comparisons he's making? Paul says, you want to know what renews me every single day? What lifts me up and gives me the strength to every day for my inner man to be renewed is that I know that the moment that my affliction, number one, is momentary, number two, it's light, but I also know that it is doing something. What is my affliction doing? It's producing. Okay? If I tell you I have a corn plant that's producing, what does that mean? It's making lots of corn, right? Paul says, my affliction is producing something. Well, what's it producing? Glory. You see that? My affliction is producing glory. I have momentary affliction that is producing eternal glory. I have light affliction that's producing heavy glory. In other words, even though my outer man is decaying, all I'm doing is racking up glory. I am racking up treasure. I am racking up reward. I am racking up inheritance. I am doing so good right now in the eternal stock market, it's not even funny. I know that this is not being wasted. I've not been forgotten. I've not been overlooked. But God is using this in my life to produce for me a glory that is beyond comparison. They can't even put them in the same room with one another. And Paul says, so We look what? What's he say in verse 18? We don't look at what we see with our eyes. This is my secret. I don't get up every morning and look at how my outer man is decaying. I don't get up every morning and look at my prison cell. I don't get up every morning and think about how bad my circumstance is. I don't look at what I can see. What do I look at? I look at what is not seen. What is not seen? What can you not see right now? Glory. I can't see. I don't know what my treasure account looks like in heaven. I don't know what my eternal home looks like. I can't see it. I don't behold it with my eyes. I don't know what the new man is going to look like. I know it's beyond compare, but I can't see it. But Paul says the secret is I fix my eyes on things above. I don't look at the circumstance here. I look at the glory that's coming. I look at the things that aren't seen, because the things which are seen are temporary. But the things which you can't see are what? They're eternal. All of this is temporary. Now, does that mean it's easy? No. 2 years. Is that long? Yes. But is it temporary? Yes. It's not eternal. And I don't know if Joseph was doing this or not, but I know Paul was. And Paul said, this is how I don't lose heart. This is how I don't give up. Even though I'm in a circumstance I do not like. My inner man focuses not on what I can see, but what I can't see. Look at chapter 5. For I know if that earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God. Anybody know the difference between a tent and a building? A tent just blows over. What about a building? Lasts a whole lot longer. Yeah, a few years ago when we had our first D-Now and we had the torrential rain, you'd have given anything to be in a building instead of a tent, right? Because rained outside, rained inside, right? We all got soaked. Tents aren't as strong as building. Do you know anything about the durability of a tent versus a building? What does this mean? Tents don't last long. Buildings last a lot longer, right? When Paul talks about an earthly tent, you know what he's talking about? This body. We have this body which is a tent. What we're waiting on is a building. We're waiting on a house not made with hands, an eternal one in the heavens. In this house, we groan, right? Because it's a tent, and because it's decaying, and because circumstances are hard, and because life is difficult. But what do we long for? To be clothed with our dwelling from heaven. We want the eternal. And Paul says, this is how I fuel my fire every single day. This is how I face my obstacles. This is how I face my hardship. This is how I face my suffering. Joseph couldn't see that, but God could. There's coming a day when God's going to make this all right, and Joseph's actually going to be explained to him why he had to go through what he had to go through. But for now, if you find yourself in a circumstance like Joseph's, you use that opportunity to not look at your circumstances, but look at what God is doing through your circumstances. You say, well, how do I know that? Well, you don't. You just know He is. And you know that momentary light affliction is producing an eternal weight of glory. And so you entrust yourself to the sovereign plan and wisdom of God, that He knows what He's doing even when I don't. He knows what He's doing even when I can't see. And whatever God is doing, it will be good because He promises it's good. Whatever God's doing, it will be for salvation because He promises it's for salvation. Does that make sense? You learned this here with Joseph. Any questions tonight?
No, sir.
Not even one?
Not even one.
All right. Well, then we will start with our prayer time, and Jasmine's on the end, so we'll work this way and wheel around.